I'm scared of China. It sounds silly, right? Well, I hope you feel it's justified by the end of this story. I regularly attend estate sales to see what I can pick up for cheap. I like to think of myself as a flipper, but tend to keep most things I buy. At one of these sales, I came across some bone china on display in a black wooden box. The box itself was shabby, but the china was a beautiful white, and the pattern was so unique. Lily flowers covered the outer edges, and in the middle of the plate was a woman's face that stared at me with sad but hopeful eyes. I knew I had to have it. When I took it home and showed my wife, she was ecstatic. It was an instant hit with everyone but my 6-year-old son Jake. The lady's face scared him so much, it got to the point where we considered not displaying it. But how could we not display something so beautiful? My wife and I figured in time, he would get used to it. We couldn't have been more wrong. The first night of owning the china, I was awoken to his screams. He had a nightmare about the plate lady. That's what he called her anyway. Jake told me she stood at the end of his bed and sung to him. With each word, her face got closer to his own before he woke up. After that, we took the china off display in our cabinet and put it in the closet of our spare room. Unfortunately, the floodgates had been opened, and each night he would wake up screaming. After the third night, we became more concerned and realized this was becoming a real problem. Jake stopped eating, and his behavior turned placid. By this stage, he was sleeping with us, but still having his nightmares. On the 7th night, I got up to use the toilet and noticed that Jake wasn't sleeping in our bed. Optimistic that he was overcoming his night terrors, I made my way to the bathroom. I stopped by his room to check on him when I heard it. A high-pitched singing coming from the spare room opposite to Jake's. I put my ear to the door and listened. It wasn't English. I could only make out bits and pieces. I opened the door and found Jake with the china he had spent all week having nightmares about. While I was confused, what really terrified me was the singing I heard coming from my son. He didn't acknowledge that I was in the room. I asked him what he was doing, but he continued to sing. I shook him out of it and carried him back to our room, trying to get an explanation. Jake had no idea what I was talking about, and just told me he was tired and wanted to sleep. There's no blueprint for parenting of this kind. I had no idea what to say. I was speechless. I decided I would leave it until the morning and left him curled up next to his mother to use the bathroom. I passed the spare room on my way back from the bathroom and turned on the light, intending to put the china away. I put the first plate back into the box when I noticed something strange. The woman's face no longer wore the sad look. She was now smiling. I almost dropped the second plate I held in my hand. A shiver ran down my spine, and after a moment of thought, I loaded the china into the box and took it to the bin out front. It may have been irrational, but I was genuinely creeped out. I wheeled the bin to the front of the house, despite the bin day being 3 days away. All I knew is that I wanted it to be as far away from my house as possible. When I got back into bed, Jake was still awake and rolled over to hug me. "Good night, father," he whispered before falling asleep. My son had never called me father. I didn't sleep for the rest of the night, but rather fought off intense anxiety. Everything felt off. Even Jake's touch creeped me out. It didn't feel natural. I told my wife what had happened the next morning, and part of her didn't believe me, so much so that she dug the plates out of the trash to see for herself. The smile I had seen was no longer there, and although I second-guessed myself, I still begged my wife to leave it in the trash. When we turned back to the house, Jake was at the window, watching us, and for a second, I swear he shot me the same smug look I'd seen on the plate. It's been 2 weeks since this incident, and Jake is back to sleeping in his own room. Nothing seems all that different about him, but I can't help this sickening feeling. It's not only the china that scares me, it's now my own son.